Back in March, we reported on the avian influenza being detected in dairy cattle. Agriculture groups and experts are working together to learn more about the virus and keep it under control. CDC believes the current risk to the general public from bird flu viruses is low. We have experts in place and monitoring the situation, but what does this mean for dairy markets and consumers' perceptions of dairy? Here to dive into the data and share more insight is Mike North, president of the producer division at Ever.Ag. Before we jump into some of the specifics, Mike, can you give a Cliff Note version of the situation?
Sure. Um, Going back to February, there was discussions around the sickness in cattle that had origins in Texas. No one knew exactly what it was. Over time, it was definitely called out to be bird flu, which the fact that the bird flu influenza virus crossed over into a mammal was a big deal, grabbed a lot of headlines. And since that time, we've had a chance to monitor how it works its way through a herd. We've noticed that it's generally in older cows that are later in lactation. We've noticed that the mortality rates are very low to almost zero, and that after a couple of weeks following some depression of milk production on the farm, herds begin to work their way back towards prior levels. Not 100%, but certainly rebounding quite healthy towards those old numbers. It has since spread from Texas to different parts around the country, 8 different states ultimately having herds that have reported having it in their cows. And we've not really seen it go beyond that. The good news for the consumer in this entire process has been that milk, because it goes through a pasteurization process after it leaves the farm, ultimately has been safe from the beginning, continues to be, and to that end, the FDA just put out an update on all of their findings this past weekend that once again confirms that in all the tests, even in samples that were taken from grocery stores where dead viral fragments were found in milk, that while the virus was present in a dead form, never was it found to be in a live form. So consumers are safe, pasteurization still works, and while we're dealing with the illness in cows, we're not seeing a lot of change in the overall health of the U.S. dairy herd and our ability to produce a lot of very safe quality milk.
And I know, Mike, you're keeping a close eye on the markets. How have the markets changed or fluctuated since the first case was released to what we're seeing now?
Honestly, the markets have done very well right from the beginning. I think because we were coming at this very scientifically and monitoring the situation with what we knew, not jumping to conclusions about what we didn't know, the market was able to maintain a lot of stability through all of the, reporting, whether it was, slow to come forward or if it was, just in question. We were relying on science, and science did the talking. There wasn't any, media scares to challenge the marketplace, so it held a fairly steady line. Now, if you go back a few weeks ago, when the first case of the virus was found in a human, it sent cattle markets down the limit. It sent a big shock to the market for a day in cattle, and then things rebounded. But we did not see a similar type of play in the milk market, and I think largely because we knew from the beginning that pasteurization was in place, and so people didn't fear what was going to happen either from a demand or a supply situation. And I think early on that was the bigger question. What will the supply be? And will we be running into a shortage because of all the milk that's being withheld and not being put into the system, which, by the way, continues to be the practice. Any cow that's found to be sick, just like we have seen forever and ever on our farms, that milk is withheld, doesn't make its way to the supply. But for those cows that don't show symptoms, we still have pasteurization to, be that catch-all. Bottom line, though, is we're not seeing big changes in milk production. If you look at the March numbers that came forward just a week and a half ago, it did show that milk production was down 1.5 points, and that wasn't far off of estimations, and that's largely a byproduct of the smaller cow herd than it is anything to do with bird flu. And so we're not seeing dramatic changes in overall milk supply on the farm either. So the milk market has taken it with a grain of salt. It's moved forward almost seamlessly. However, it does add a little bit more to this low supply story. And we've watched in the last couple of weeks as milk prices have been climbing higher on shortened inventories of cheese, which is a byproduct of consumption. And that question around if the consumption is that strong, will the inventories be enough as we get towards fall, has led that Class 3 market on a nice little price rally to the tune of about $1.50.
And I know you are always talking a believer of, market risk and having things in place. Would you be telling your clients to modify anything with the current situation that's happening now for the future?
Absolutely, especially with the rally that's been given to us. If you look at the Class 4 markets, which are the butter and powder-oriented class markets, that Class 4 market's been strong for the last 9 months. Class 3, however, as I mentioned, has rebounded $1.50 and in some cases upwards to $2.50 to $3 in certain months. And we still have this issue. We still don't ultimately know what the emotional response of the consumer is. We know that logically the product is safe. However, as news kind of broke in what I'll call popular media and the global press agencies, there was some real material facts that were left out of some of that reporting. And when we talk about feeding fluid milk to our children, there's a level of emotion that comes with that particular setting that may invoke some sort of consumer pushback. It's unwarranted, but that's not to say that it won't happen. And so if I'm a dairyman and I'm looking at a rally that just took place, not because of bird flu, but because of other situations, if that rally is now met with consumer pushback out of some emotional response and or just simple price mechanics, I've got a lot to lose. And so it's very wise for dairymen to take advantage of these opportunities because we don't know what the longer term fallout looks like. It's an unknown. I'd like to think the consumer is going to walk right through this unscathed, unaltered in their opinion of dairy and dairy products. But we can't ever know that for sure. So that's just part of good risk management, is to take that opportunity to be one step ahead of what that potential risk is.
Last question for you, Mike. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the least, 10 being the most, how nervous are you about this situation?
Like a 2.
Okay.
just largely because we are, again, questioning what the emotional response of the consumer is, and there's no factual data to come behind that yet. And if I had that data, I'd probably be a 1. But because I don't, I have to, kind of look at it through the lens of this big what if. And I would tell you anything less than a 1 warrants risk management. It just does, because that chance just lives in the weeds, and we don't know when it pops its head up.
Right. And I think one thing, since I've been following this, it's been really reassuring to see that we have so many experts in place and how fast we can come together, have protocols in place. I mean, you look at USDA's website, DACAP, the state agencies, everyone's really working together to keep this under control. Like, I feel like I have such faith in our supply chain and our experts that are in the field that are working on this. And can you agree with that, that I feel like they do have a good handle on it?
Absolutely. And, it was an issue held in the hands of the USDA and more recently elevated into a bigger discussion and a bigger committee of influences. And one thing that did come out of that was the limitation of cattle movement interstate, specifically among lactating cattle. There's still some questions about what that means for, say, springing heifers or for cull cows. There's some gray areas that still exist around that recent rule, but for the most part, USDA and being close to that space of animal husbandry and how we care for livestock has really been good at speaking into the situation and keeping it logical and not losing its state of objectivity.
Mike North, president of the producer division at Ever.Ag, has been our guest. We will make sure that we update our website and keep you up to date with the most relevant information. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Joanna.
Thank you.